I've really recently been having an epiphany surrounding growth, especially growing up in a country that is so fixated on perfection and constantly becoming the next and the next and the greater and the better thing, that sometimes makes progress feel like it's not happening quick enough, or at the rate or at this level of status that it needs to be happening at. And I can speak for myself, but it doesn't leave room for us to be ignorant. It doesn't leave room for us to have biases that need to grow and shift and evolve from, because we're already afraid of the scrutiny and the criticism and the chastising and the exile we would get from society, from our community, from our parents, from our peers, from our friends. And I've learned through vocalizing very strong opinions, whether or not they're rooted in truth, or if they were maybe flawed or didn't consider other perspectives, or maybe they were hyper focused on one specific thing at the moment. It helped me to really test and gauge that, and I recognized instantly this sort of battle that we have consciously, and on spaces like, Instagram, where it's very short form content, where it's catered to your algorithm and to what you like to see, and it's very difficult to capture nuance and additional data that helps to clarify someone's intention. To be honest, most people aren't logging in to find that information, and they themselves maybe create that, or they intentionally curate their page for that. And I think that region, or that source of pressure for many people, is why so many of these misunderstandings happen, and why no one wants to share how they truly feel, because someone's always offended by it. Someone has an attack for that. Someone's going to point out how it's an ignorant thing and how it hurts somebody else. And there's a lot less empathy and a lot less patience for misunderstanding, for giving suggestions and speaking alternatively. It's very much defensive. And I'm not saying that I'm above that, or I haven't participated in these things at all either. Like, I'm just noticing the human propensity that has evolved, especially like in the United States, in America, whatever you want to call this landmass that we're on. And I find that really fascinating, because I was having breakthroughs about that failure, about not being able to know everything, and it's so crazy, because I've seen so many misunderstandings happen because people are not culturally informed. So, and I'm talking about media culture. So because you didn't see this event with this celebrity, you don't know what people are talking about in this regard. And then you end up, because you go to work, you have a job, you focus on that, you read books at the end of the day, you exercise, and you mind your business. So then you have a misunderstanding with someone else because you didn't see the whole thing, because you're not on social media. You prioritize your peace and your privacy, and you're seen as, like a traitor because you bought something that person made. And it's like, how could you ever do this thing? It's so terrible. They're such a bad person. And now you're like in this kind of standoff between someone who you've built a relationship with that you know in person, and the so-called loyalty you've pledged to someone you've never even met before, or even knew had anything going on. And this has been a huge source of misunderstanding for most of my life, just because, one, I'm like on the spectrum, and I just don't think like how other people think. And I've had to learn to let people assume the worst of my intention or where I'm coming from. And I get it. Like, our country's stupid. It's great. I love it. How it became what it is, not so much. Am I grateful that I'm here? Yeah. There needs work. You know what I'm saying? And if you know what I'm saying, you know what I'm saying. Okay? But all this to say, like, I want to be able to contribute some sort of relief for us to, like, have a refreshing moment on social media. Just real quick, even if that's the only time that we have for it. And also to, of course, build in other spaces where we can just unpack. But I noticed the way that that's, affected so many people I think it creates this idea that, we don't have our own secrets. We don't have our own biases and things that we project upon. We don't have our own fears. We're perfect. We know everything. Everyone else is making a mistake, especially if they're brave enough to share what they feel publicly, even if it's rooted in something that could evolve at a later point. Who knows when that's meant to happen for that person? And I'm not at all saying like you're supposed to stay around something that is in opposition to what you desire for yourself or your life. But I just think that polarity is so fascinating. There's so much tension there that's palpable. And I can also feel the longing for resolution, because I don't think people speak out about something that they don't like if they didn't actually care or want to see something change. If you don't give a fuck, you just ghosting. You're not saying anything. No explanation. That's it. Peace. Blocked. Whatever it is. So it's kind of a fine line for me between that. But I'd love to hear what this brought up for you all, and how you're moving through the realization that there are areas of yourself that need to be developed. And maybe it's not so much ignorance or bias or anything negative, but maybe it's like being new in a space and realizing that you have to look up to authority now, or someone who's been there before, and maybe what your relationship with that is like in a new work environment, or if you're apprenticing somewhere, or if you've always been used to doing things by yourself and now all of a sudden you have people around you and you realize you actually kind of have a fear of people. You don't really like being around them. You're suspicious, right? You're worried if they're going to stab you in the back, and like all the things. Like, we have areas of life where we have to grow, and that means we have to create room for our own mistakes, failures, misjudgments, and to not believe that people aren't capable of forgiving us, or that we are worthy of forgiveness. And like, forgiveness is a really tricky thing too, because I think sometimes people don't want to be wrong, especially in the big world on social media where everyone can see you, because they don't know if people are going to continue to hold that against them. And we see it all the time. These humans that are idolized, we call celebrities and influencers, do something and we shame them forever. It's cancel culture. Never talk to them again. Everything they've done goes down the drain as trash. And like, we treat people like they're worthless. Like they don't serve anything to us because they don't meet everything that's part of our box. And I struggled with that a lot, advocating for women specifically, and people thought that I wasn't like inclusive, or I didn't care about other people's rights. And because I was talking about like, I want to preserve the rights of women because I know that history has been erased and neglected. I understand women as a construct that's been created in the Western world. I'm studying gender studies. Like, I get it. I understand. At the same time, I still feel a strong sense of revering the people who have come from, who identify that way. And knowing that doesn't have to exclude anybody else. It's like, everyone wants to have a space that's for them. Why can't I still have a space for women? And I get that that's, seen away, right? But I think there are ways to have these kinds of discussions. There are ways to include groups of people into certain things. There are some ways where we need to exclude some people from certain things, and that's a whole different conversation. To be honest, okay, boundaries. Let's get that clear. But also, it takes a lot of courage for you to be willing to be yourself, and to, I think sometimes like you adapt a warrior spirit where you understand, like, in order to become a great warrior, you're going to have to get hit, you're going to get knocked down, you're going to get cut, you're going to have to heal and recover, and that's just the process, and you can't skip that part. I think part of me thought that I could skip certain parts and just get to the good stuff without going through those little initiations, right? And the growth is the messy part, it's the uncomfortable part, it's the part that shakes your bones, that keeps you up at night, and that you don't tell people about, what makes you squeeze your pillow and all the things. So I just want to create space for that. And I may not be the person to hold space for you. I may not be the person to be in community with, but maybe there's something that you take from this and you talk to someone else about, and it just, or maybe it's like something that you process in your mind mentally that helps you to navigate through it. But this has been something that's been coming up for me, and I wanted to share it here. So thanks for listening.